My name is Garrett, and this happened when I was a sophomore in college. After freshman year, I didn't get a dorm, so I scrambled for off-campus housing. Long story short, I ended up in a co-op, part of a three-house community near campus, but not really. It wasn't ideal, but it was cheap, and I didn't have many options. Plus, I had a bike, so I didn't mind the extra travel time. Most of the residents were young students like me, but there were a few exceptions. Alumni, a couple of TAs, and some older students finishing their degrees. But the person who stood out to me immediately was an older woman who lived in one of the other houses. She was probably in her late 50s, but looked older. Her graying hair and slight limp suggested some kind of back injury. She was quiet, kept to herself, and always had a blank expression. I assumed she was faculty or an alum, but no one explained, and I didn't ask. The first strange thing I noticed was in our common kitchen. The other two houses had their own, so I wasn't sure why she was there. She wasn't cooking, eating, or talking to anyone. She just stood, watching us as we cooked, chatted, and listened to music. No one acknowledged her, which felt odd. I made eye contact a few times and got the eerie feeling she was watching me specifically, though I dismissed it as paranoia. A few nights later, I was in my room doing homework when I glanced out my window. She was in the street, staring up at me. It was late and cold, yet she stood there, unmoving. I waved, trying to be polite, but instantly regretted it. She didn't wave back. Instead, she jumped up and down, excited, then ran toward her house. I felt sick. Now she knew exactly where I slept. When I asked my housemate about her, he told me she had always been there and that I should ignore her like everyone else did. When I pressed for more, he admitted he didn't know anything, just that someone had told him the same when he moved in. That didn't sit right with me, so I kept asking until a senior from her house finally gave me some answers. He said she was associated with the university, a little odd but harmless. When I asked why no one found it strange, he said the property manager controlled who lived there, not them. I wasn't satisfied, but there wasn't much I could do, so I tried to ignore her until things got worse. One night, I left my room and nearly ran into her standing right outside my door. I jumped back, startled. It was past midnight on a Tuesday and the house was mostly silent. She didn't react, just turned and walked away, as if I had intruded on her. There were other incidents. Finding her in places she had no reason to be, acting strangely. Then I lost my room key. The houses had been a hotel once, so each room had its own lock. Most people left their doors unlocked, but I wasn't comfortable with that. I had a spare, but was irritated about having to replace the key. A few nights later, I woke up random. At first I wasn't sure why, then I heard a soft bumping sound from my closet every 20 seconds, like something shifting. My heart pounded, but I wasn't the type to freeze up. Slowly, I walked over, took a deep breath, and ripped the closet door open. I screamed, and it wasn't pretend. She was in my closet. She had one of my ties around her neck, holding a kitchen knife in one hand, her eyes wide. My scream startled her, and before I could react, she lunged. I screamed again, this time in pure fear. I wrestled her to the ground, disarmed her easily since she was frail, but she fought, kicking, biting, screaming. I shouted for help, and my friend Lee rushed in. Together, we pinned her down while someone called the police. Everything after that was a blur. The cops arrived quickly, arrested her, and found my key on her. A few weeks later, we learned the truth. She was the property manager's sister. Instead of getting her help for her severe mental health issues, he let her live there secretly. He was later arrested for negligence and other charges. I blame him more than her. He failed her. But that doesn't change the fact that she tried to kill me. I don't know why she fixated on me, but I never want to experience anything like that again. I'm graduating soon, and while I'll miss college, I'll never forget that night. I didn't experience this personally, but I watched it unfold, so I'm telling it anyway. My husband Benjamin and I have lived in our two-story home for 20 years. Our kids have moved out and I'm retired, spending a lot of time on our front porch knitting, reading, or enjoying the weather. A new neighbor moved in across the street, and I was relieved. I was tired of looking at an empty house. He was a young man, mid-20s, with an expensive BMW and flashy clothes. I figured he was well off for pretending. He introduced himself as Quinn, a few years out of college, working in entertainment as a freelancer for some internet personality. He was bright and got along with Benjamin, discussing sports and investments. For months, everything was normal. Quinn and I exchanged waves when he left. Then, I noticed a young blonde woman visiting his house frequently while he was out. She had a key, so I assumed she was his girlfriend. One evening, I finally saw them together, confirming my suspicion. Then I overheard them arguing in his driveway. She was furious. Later, she continued visiting his house when he wasn't home. Benjamin told me to mind my business, so I did. One night, we woke up to sirens. Police swarmed Quinn's house. The woman was arrested without a fight, and Quinn was rushed out on a stretcher covered in blood. A week later, when he returned, he explained everything. The woman, Ellie, had stolen his spare key and made a copy. She demanded gifts, became possessive, and tracked his location. She had hidden cameras in his house, replacing the batteries each time she visited. When he tried to break up with her, she refused. Watching through the cameras, she saw everything, then showed up the next night with a knife. Quinn barely survived. Shaken, he moved out soon after, fearing her friends knew where he lived. We never saw him again, and I pray he's doing okay. No one should go through that, especially not someone so young. When I moved into my new place, I was looking for a fresh start. I had a bad breakup that made staying in my old city impossible. I came into money young and made poor choices with the women I surrounded myself with. Lesson learned. My new neighborhood was quiet, low crime, mostly families. The houses were spaced out, except my neighbor's, which was unusually close to mine. It was massive, the kind a huge family would live in. But when I introduced myself, I found a young guy, even younger than me, living there alone. His name was Damon. He was friendly, excited to meet someone his age in a neighborhood of families. But when I asked what he did for work, he hesitated before vaguely saying, finance. He seemed cool, but I couldn't shake how odd it was that he lived there alone. I texted him later to hang out, but he always said he was busy. Eventually, I stopped trying. Over time, I realized something strange. Damon never had visitors, never got deliveries, never even left the house. His car was always in the driveway. It was like he didn't exist outside that house. And then I started noticing the lights in his house at night, flickering on and off in a pattern. It didn't feel right. I'd been keeping an eye on Damon's place for a while, not intentionally of course, it was just a glance away from my monitor. But after a while I started noticing things, little habits, patterns. I know that sounds obsessive, maybe even creepy, but it wasn't like I was spying, it was just hard not to notice. One Wednesday night I woke up around 2 a.m. to loud music. I sleep with my windows open, so it must have carried in easily. At first I thought I was imagining it, maybe dreaming, but no. It was real. I got out of bed, peered through my window, and saw 7 or so cars lined up in Damon's driveway. There was no mistaking it. He was having a party. Now, I'm not one to complain about noise. I've been to my share of house parties. But this was the middle of the week, and the volume was insane. Figuring I'd just go over and ask him to turn it down, I threw on a hoodie and walked over. From the outside, it was clear this was a full-blown party. I knocked on the door, no answer. Pulled out my phone to text Damon, but decided against it. He'd just ignore me and give me some lame excuse in the morning. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. When I tried the door handle, half expecting it to be locked, it swung right open. The first thing I saw inside was a pile of shoes in the foyer, at least 10 pairs, but something was off. There was no one there. I moved further in, expecting to find people in the living room or kitchen, but the place was empty, no drinks, no signs of life. The only thing filling the house was the sound of laughter, chatter, and clinking glasses. Except, it wasn't real. It was a recording. The realization made my stomach tighten. The music, the noise, it was all fake. But then, where were the shoes from? The cars? There had to be people somewhere. Against my better judgment, I started moving through the house, searching for any sign of what was really going on. That's when I noticed a door slightly ajar. Something told me what I was looking for was downstairs. I hesitated, but pushed it open. The basement was dark, except for a faint light glowing from somewhere deeper in. As I stepped down, a low mechanical grinding sound met my ears. Heavy, rhythmic, like machinery or a buzzsaw. The closer I got, the stronger the stench of bleach or some kind of cleaning solution became. Then I saw them. Through a crack in another door, I spotted 3 men standing with their backs to me. They were older than Damon, significantly so. They wore heavy-duty work clothes, protective goggles, thick rubber gloves, and work boots. their presence out of place in a house party setting. I couldn't see what they were looking at, but something about it filled me with dread. The pit in my stomach deepened. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. I turned, moving as quietly as I could back toward the stairs. But then, the light behind me dimmed. Someone had closed the door. I didn't wait. I sprinted up the stairs, ran through the house, and burst out the front door. Instead of heading straight home, I jumped my own fence and slipped in through the side entrance, locking it behind me. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't let anyone know I had been there. I crouched below my office window and peeked out at Damon's house. It was quiet for a moment. Then the front door flew open and about 8 men spilled out, scanning the yard, driveway, and street. They looked like the same older guys from the basement, arguing about something I couldn't make out. One of them shoved another, and for a second I thought a fight was about to break out, but it didn't. After a few tense moments, they all went back inside. The music stopped soon after. I stayed at my window, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Should I call the cops? What would I even say? There wasn't exactly a crime to report, and what disturbed me even more was that none of my other neighbors seemed bothered. I figured if they'd heard it and someone called the police, Damon would know it was me. But the shoes... I couldn't stop thinking about the shoes. Why were there so many if the only people I'd seen were those men in boots? Did they deliberately bring extra pairs just to leave in the foyer? The next morning, every single car was gone, including Damon's. I tried to distract myself with work, but I kept glancing at his house. After hours passed without his car returning, I decided to go for a walk, partly to clear my head, mostly to sneak a few glances through his windows. But there was nothing. Days passed, then weeks. Damon never came back. His lawn grew wild, and an untouched stack of packages piled up by his front door. The more time that passed, the more the whole situation gnawed at me. Finally, I had to know. I knocked on a few neighbors' doors and casually asked if they'd heard the party from that night. Every single one of them gave me the same answer. What party? They hadn't heard a thing. Even when I told them which house it was, even when I mentioned how loud the music had been, they had no idea what I was talking about. I felt like I was going crazy. That was a few months ago. I don't know what to think anymore. Maybe I am just paranoid, but something tells me that party wasn't just a party. And if Damon ever comes back, if he ever does, I'm debating whether or not I should just ask him outright, because I need to know the truth.